Okay, so real short video today, and actually kind of the opposite of last time. Rather than being inspired by somebody else's comment, I actually got a quick video idea from my own comment. I was watching a recent video by 2C Phoenix talking about Super Mario Sunshine, specifically the sort of spiral language, and that, well, being a language that he dubbed Dolphic, and that's a whole video that I'll link below. That's necessary to watch if you want to understand the rest of this video, so go watch it and come back. I'll be waiting for you. Okay, you better have watched that, otherwise you're gonna be very lost. So anyways, if you go below, I left a comment, and I'm just gonna go over some of my ideas about that right now. Basically, my idea was that means that there's two separate writing systems going on in that world, and that's very interesting because if you look at the history of most places in the world, Mediterranean islands have a very high representation of dual writing systems being prominent amongst their populace. So Cyprus, Crete, and Sicily are great examples. Each separately, if you were to go over each history, like just for Crete alone, you had during the Minoan era both Linear A and the Minoan hieroglyphs, and then during both the Roman and Venetian occupation, you had both Greek and Latin. During Ottoman and Arabic conquest, you obviously had Arabic script and Greek, and then nowadays you have the English alphabet and Greek as well. In other words, most of their history has been duolingual. I mean, for Crete, I believe that would be something like, let me get my notes here. 57% of its history was with two or more being commonly used, with only 43% being only one language that was primarily written with. And then for Cyprus and Sicily, that was even more. For Cyprus, that was 77%, if I recall correctly. And then for Sicily, that was even more. For Sicily, basically, for ratio, here's a great example. For how many years two or more have been commonly used? 2,656 since writing was introduced to the island, whereas the entire accumulative time span where only one was predominantly used, and by predominant I mean more than like 90% of the population for when we did have data, 368. So that ratio is huge. Hopefully I'm showing those graphs on screen right now, the pie charts. So yeah, they both have, all three have a long history, and if you look at other islands in the region, they all have a long history of having multiple writing systems, and in particular a bunch of developers from Japan going to the West, in particular the Mediterranean region, are going to notice that, because in a lot of the West, that's not necessarily the case. You'll have a lot of like duolingual signages, but they'll typically both be some type of like Latin script or something like that. Whereas if you're coming from Japan and using multiple scripts yourself on a cultural level, these developers are going to be like, hey, that looks pretty damn familiar. So that's a possible connection there. But anyway, now that we've got the sort of broad background of that set up, if you go over back to the video that I'm referencing, all of these spirals and letters, while they do, some of them look a lot like their English counterparts, honestly, if you look at Old Phoenician writing and Linear A, I see a lot more similarities in their shape if you compare the two. I mean, just here, I'm hopefully showing that right now. Oh my goodness, it's just, I don't know. There's a lot more common patterns, and I'm probably overlooking this. The chances of it actually being inspired by that, admittedly, are not 100% by any means. And then in addition to that, it would specifically be these languages, is even more niche. But if I were writing a writing system, and I wanted it to inspire it by those, I might create something that would look very similar to this. Now, the clear difference that you might see is that there's a lot more spirals with the Mario script, basically, compared to what I've got going on with the other ones, such as Phoenician and Linear A. But there's actually a very important reason why you might want to use spirals for representing Mediterranean cultures. In particular, the Phaistos disc, which was a very key point. Please look it up if you aren't familiar with it, because I am not going to bother trying to explain it and mucking it up. and we learn more about it seemingly every single decade. But it was a very important piece of Linear A, and if you look at it on the screen right now, it was in a spiral pattern. So if you combine the spiral pattern from the Phaistos disk, which was, again, very key to how we understood Linear A, well, we haven't deciphered it, but understood that it's a writing system, it exists, and it's part of the Minoan culture, and they wrote this down, and this is part of that culture, that history. That would explain maybe some of the spiral representation too. So this is a very fringe theory. The chances of it being right are small, but I'm just saying there's a possibility that the spiral patterns in Super Mario Sunshine are both inspired by the history of a lot of Mediterranean islands and specifically by some of their old texts. However, one possibility, and there were some issues that 2C Phoenix ran into as far as some things not making sense and not being translatable, this might not even be an alphabet. This might be some sort of hieroglyphic syllabary type of thing, to where it's not how we in the West as English speakers would understand writing to be. And so I would caution against that. And yeah, not only that, but it would also make more sense, because just I can't think of any actual writing systems. Well, I came up with the closest that I can think of. I can't think of any actual writing systems that are that like swirly spiral dominant. So I can't help but wonder if it's not representing a writing system like with letters at all, at least in the like colloquial sense. But anyways, that's enough theorizing for today. Just some stuff for you to chew on. Have a good one.